Hey folks, you know I take my trail camera intel pretty seriously. It's a huge part of how I build my hunting strategy, and I'm always looking for gear that just flat out works. Stuff I can rely on. Backed by solid people and the best customer support in the business. That's exactly why I run Tacticam Reveal cell cameras. Whether you're just getting started or you're a full-blown data junkie like me, they've got a camera to fit your budget and your hunting style. My go-to currently is the Reveal 3.0 series with fully integrated GPS. These things are dead simple to set up. Less fiddling, more scouting and hunting. And they run on most major service providers and will automatically connect you to the strongest signal in your area. So no more hiking to the top of a ridge just to realize you've got the wrong service provider. Been there, not fun. Here's the kicker. You don't even need an SD card. That means fewer trips in, less pressure on your spots, and more real-time intel sent straight to your phone. And if you pair it with a Reveal solar panel or a lithium cartridge, you can keep those cameras running longer and spend more time doing what actually matters. Scouting new ground, dialing in a setup, or maybe, just maybe, finally cleaning the garage like you told your wife you would before the season started. Don't just take my word for it. Check out Tacticam Reveal at tacticam.com. Tacticam. Everything you need to take your hunting to the next level. Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Oscio gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Oscio's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Oscio. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. You know, when it comes to mobile hunting, weight and efficiency matter. And that's why for years I've trusted Tethered, the industry leader in saddle hunting gear. Like always, this year they've taken it up a notch with their new whitetail frame pack and the hybrid or the minimalist bino harness. And if you're looking for their most comfortable saddle they've ever built, meet the all-new Carnivore 2P. If you're like me and spend long hours in season scouting, hiking miles, and pulling those all-day sits, you got to check out Tethered's gear. I spent over 30 days this October and November chasing a particular buck. Long hikes, long sits. And Tethered system kept me dialed in. My kit, the Ultralock saddle, 1-Sticks, Predator CFX platform, and the Fast Pack. If you're serious about staying mobile and staying quiet and hunting smarter, check out everything they've got at tethered.com. Tethered, made for saddle hunters by saddle hunters. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Tacticam Reveal Cellular Cameras. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 433. Today I'm joined by my buddy Chris Weist to talk sealing the deal on big bucks now, so stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine here this, I guess we're at the end of March already almost. It's crazy that spring's officially here. So if you're not got your spring scouting or your winter scouting done yet, now's the time to kind of jump to it. As usual, I'm woefully behind. I've only had like a day to get out. So I'm hoping that next weekend, fingers crossed, that I'm able to get out. If the weather's nice, I've just had some stuff going on Saturdays. It's kept me from getting out, but I have plenty of time to get things done. And when I get out, I'm not too worried about it. I'll do quality work. It may not, in the past years here, it's not been, I haven't been out as often as I would like. Just, life things kind of get in the way. But what I will say is that I've found that because I have, limited time to be out doing that stuff, I actually get a lot more done, or I feel like the quality of the scouting, or what I learn, is more valuable than maybe what I've learned in years past and maybe spent more time and put more miles on or more hours or whatever the case is. I just feel like the work's been more focused, I guess you could say. But this past weekend was a killer weekend. Two things I want to make mention of. One was, for all the people out there listening that are wrestling fans, and we'll quickly transition away from this. I hope you had a chance to watch the NCAA championship tournament. Killer weekend of wrestling. Penn State wins another national title. No big surprise there. Couple national champs. The entire team All-American, which is crazy. It's only the second time that's ever happened, I think, in the tournament's history. So congrats to those guys. They put on a hell of a show all year. The tournament itself was awesome. A bunch of really good matches, a lot of upsets, which happens, this time of year every year. And then the finals were bananas. Even if you're a casual wrestling fan, if you get a chance, go to YouTube and watch the Gable Steveson, Wyatt Hendrickson finals. It was probably one of the best matches I've ever personally got to watch. Maybe second to only the Bo Nickel pin over the Ohio State wrestler when we won the team tournament. I think it was 2016 or something like that. When I say we, like I was on the team, but you get the point. Penn State won that tournament, and it was because of Bo Nickel's win. But I had a vested interest in that, so I think as a casual fan, this match that happened on Saturday, but at the heavyweight, heavyweight class, is probably the best for a casual fan to watch. The place was electric. It was crazy. I wasn't able to be there. It was in Philadelphia this year. I should have probably went to catch some matches, but wasn't able to make it. Regardless, awesome weekend of wrestling. And then aside from that, I was able to finally finish my zero arrow for my new bow. I'd been playing around with a bunch of different arrow spine, insert weight, point weight kind of configurations, and finally landed on, I was trying a couple different Black Eagle spines. Vintages is what I was using. And then I was also using a Grizzly Stick test kit as well. And what I found was that the Black Eagle actually works best for me. 400 spine, have a 200 grain field point, and then a 100 grain insert is what I ended up going with. And I built a second arrow like a week or so ago that was 500 spine that shot okay. I just felt like when I got to this 400 spine, like it just shot way more consistent. Arrow after arrow, it just like would be landing where I wanted it to land and be straight and tune really easily for me. And so I had a couple of those already fletched and stuff like that. So I was able to just kind of cut those to length and fling some arrows and was shooting darts. So it was one of those things where I had a kind of a preferred setup that I wanted to use. But this bow wanted something else. And so I'm just going to listen to the bow and shoot the arrows that it prefers to shoot and not get hung up in whether or not it's the exact setup that I was looking for or whatever. Because at the end of the day, I have to remind myself that, the point of this is to be as accurate as possible, especially whenever I'm newer. I was messaging with a buddy on Instagram, and he said, the setup, the build that I had was a pretty forgiving setup. And my immediate thought was, good. I'm going to need the forgiveness here in my early journey into trying to kill something with a longbow. So that was kind of my weekend in a nutshell. Like I said, hope to get out next weekend and do some work in the field. Try to get some additional cameras out, pull a few cameras, check a bunch of cameras I didn't get to check toward the end of last year. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump into today's show. Have a cool show for you guys today. I actually have a fella on that is it's kind of funny. Like we don't know each other, but we actually grew up not far from each other. When I say not far from each other, like down the road. Now we're big gap in age, so it's not like we were, in high school together and stuff like that. But I'm sure I went to school with some of his family members, and he knows some of my family members. It was kind of wild for us to kind of, or for me at least, to realize that I'm having someone from basically my hometown on the show for the first time, outside of my buddy Tate, who's an old timer that kind of brought me into bow hunting. But, a guest that I've reached out to, didn't know, and had him on the show, and then realized that he's from where I'm from, which is kind of wild. So have my buddy Chris Weist on. Great hunter. We talk about a bunch of different stuff. He was a competitive powerlifter for a bunch of years. And, kills really, really good deer, as an understatement, but it's just one of those dudes that's a grinder, a woodsman, has all the grit that you need to chase, big mature deer. And knowing, now that I know where he's from specifically, he's doing it in an area that is exponentially harder than a lot of the rest of the state of even in Pennsylvania. So if you think of Pennsylvania as just being a tough place to kill big deer in general, or can be, he's doing it in a part of the state that, certainly isn't known for big deer. You get into some of the places like out west in Western PA and stuff like that, there's a lot, I won't say a lot, but, they have a history of growing some really high caliber deer with relative consistency, right? I think, where Chris is coming from and growing up in that area and knowing what the deer kind of are. And, I probably hunted that area 5 or 6 years ago, because that's where all my family's from. And it's just, it's a struggle to find good age class deer, and he's able to do it pretty consistently, and is killing the top end of the deer that are in that particular area. So, without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and jump into today's show. As always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got on none other than Mr. Unleash the Weist, Chris Weist. What's going on, buddy?
Just glad to be here, man. Chat it up. Have a good time.
That's right, man. So let me ask you, did I say your last name right? Because I grew up with some Weists, and I wasn't sure. Some say Weist, some say Weist, and I wasn't sure.
Yep, it's Weist. You got it.
Nice. Awesome. Are you in Western PA? Is that where you're located?
It's like southeastern.
Southeast. Oh, southeastern.
Yeah.
Ish. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah.
you and I are closer together or closer in proximity than I had thought. So that means we probably ought to hang out at some point.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're probably less than 2 hours, around 2 hours.
Really? Okay, nice. For some reason, I don't know why, but I thought you were in Western PA. It might have been because a lot of the folks, so I grew up in the more central/western part of the state, and all the Weists I know and grew up with are all in that general area. And so that might have been just me thinking that that you were from that area, just from historical growing up, knowing some folks back there. But so with that, man, let's just kind of jump into it, dude. I always kind of like to do an icebreaker. I clearly don't know where you live, right? So no stalking going on here, right? So we're clear on that. And but before we jump into hunting and all that good stuff that we'll chat about today, just give people a little bit of background about yourself, like where you're from, what you do for a living, and things of that nature.
Yeah, like I said, I'm here from Pennsylvania and been welding for the last 11, 12 years.
Okay.
Pretty much keeps me busy other than training and hunting. Man, there's not a whole lot to me. I try to keep it simple and keep a clean slate.
Yeah, that's right, man. Busy hands keep you out of trouble for sure.
Absolutely.
Nice. So welding? What type of welding are you doing?
I've done a little bit of everything. I've worked on tank cars, done fabrication, small parts. It's just varies. But right now I won't go into specifics, but we pretty much just build like big rock crushers.
Okay, nice. Yeah, welding was one of the skills that I picked up when I was a kid. We had a farm in one particular area, and so it wasn't like I was a good welder or anything like that. But my stepdad was a really, really good welder, and so we'd be baling hay or whatever, and a tractor hitch would break or something like that. And so I was probably like 12, I guess, and that was when I got my first welding lesson in the garage. Essentially, it's like, hey, take these two pieces of metal and put them together. That was like the direction I got, and did it right and screwed it all up. And then stepdad came out and kind of taught me a couple things and stuff like that. And so then from there, it was if something needed to get tacked together or whatever, I could do it well enough that it would hold. It might not look pretty, on the farm, but it would get the job done. And then and I really enjoyed it. It's one of those things I wish I would have kept up with because I actually really liked it. I actually went so far as to like Cannondale bike factory is in my hometown, and my stepdad kind of ran the welding department. And at one point, at this point, I was working there in the summer between I think in between semesters of college or something like that. And his one buddy actually ran the welding department at that point, and I was working on this new carbon fiber bike that they had just developed, and like the process was really small with this press. Is like you'd only do so many kind of like carbon fiber pieces at a time. The press would take so long in order to kind of make the pieces, and then you'd have some time, whenever you were waiting you'd clean up the other pieces that came out, and then once you got that done, you're just kind of waiting for the press to finish up. And so I had a fair amount of time on my hands, and so I'd go back to the welding shop and talk to the guys and stuff. And the one guy, his name was Scott. And he was like, hey, you want to jump in a welding booth and do some welding? And I'm like, okay. I was like, because it's all aluminum, right? I was just, welding hard metals at the farm and stuff like that. You couldn't mess up. So they gave me old spare bike tubing and stuff like that and had me start on that and started welding. And he was kind of showing me how to weld, that particular type of metal. And it got good enough to where it's like I'd work part of the day in the carbon fiber shop. And then whenever I was done at, around noon with like the press, set the last press up, I would leave and then go to the welding department. I would sit, and then I was actually starting to weld some actual like production bike frames, which was pretty cool. And it's just a bummer. I wish I would have kept up with it because it's a skill that I'm always like, man, that's just a good skill to have, dude.
So without giving the town away, was the Cannondale shop right beside a Bedford Ford dealer?
It was,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're from the same town then.
That's awesome, dude.
Yep.
So you and I literally grew up in the same. That's
Yep.
hilarious, man.
Yep. Yeah, we'll have to talk after this is done. We probably know a lot of the same people.
We
Yeah.
probably do, man. Well, it's funny because how funny is this? Dude? People are listening to this and like these two people, like it's like those matchmaking TV shows or something, like two people that know each other but don't know each other type of thing. The But yeah, it's yeah, we grew up in the same town, which is awesome because I'd followed had known of you for like a little while and kind of saw you on social media and stuff like that, and I was always kind of thinking in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, I wonder if he's from back home, because
Mhm.
I don't meet people with your last name very many other places, you know what I
Yep.
mean? So that's wild, man. So I know a lot more about you than I thought I did, probably.
Probably.
Probably went to school with some of your relatives and stuff. So this is kind of a dumb question. Then now that I know where you're from, I was going to ask you kind of how you started hunting, but I kind of know. But like for people who are listening, like how did you get into hunting and stuff? Because where we're from, man, it's a rite of passage.
Yeah, pretty much just like you said. My dad was throwing me into his coat pocket so he could get out in the woods, you know what I mean? So I was kind of drug into it until I had to shoot my own deer. And then, I mean, it just, obviously, you know how it is. You shoot your first deer and you're just hooked from there. It just only gets worse.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Was there I'm curious for you if there was like a particular experience or like a moment that happened that was one of those things that kind of solidified like, yep, this is because I mean, growing up, it's like, I think at least for me growing up, I wanted to do it because I always saw how much fun my dad had, and I just liked to be in the woods and grew up in the country, and I was always out in the woods anyway. And it was just a matter of like, when I became old enough to go with the guys. And then it was one of those things where, I wanted to be kind of part of the older guy crowd, I wanted my uncles and stuff to like not see me as a little kid anymore, and stuff like that. And then as I got older, it became more about, more about the strategy and like the game of it. You know what I mean? And that was kind of like a moment for me where it was like, I knew that at that point that it meant more to me than just going out and hunting. I guess is one way to say it. Was there a moment for you where that kind of like where you had those kind of developments?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a two-parter. So 2011, me and my dad went and scouted some of the public ground here close to the house. Just, he was just kind of showing me an area that he used to hunt when he was a kid. And we scouted a little bit and set my idle like a 35-pound steel climbing stand and hopped up in that thing the first day of bow season. And opening morning, I shot like a 16-inch 7 point. And
Mm-hmm.
that was like, at that point, was like the biggest buck I'd shot with my bow. So that was
Mm-hmm.
like part one. And then part two, it was like 2012, the next season, I went in there and I hunted that spot probably like 6, 7 times. And I actually seen a good buck and I grunted him into the base of my tree and killed him. And it was like an 18-inch 8 pointer, probably like 110 inches. And it was just like, at that moment when I was absolutely by myself, did everything by myself, called that deer and shot him 10 yards under my tree. I was absolutely hooked right from there. I knew I was going to do it for the rest of my life.
Right. Yeah. It's funny how you can, I mean, if you think about it, you can probably still remember like everything about that day, I would imagine.
Yep. Yeah. So
It's
funny story. I used to drive this like little Ford Escort, 5 speed when I was in high school. And I would drive that thing through the mountain, then have to like dodge all the erosion ditches and stuff to get back in. And I walked out in, shot that buck. So then I had to put my jacket and my bow and that like 30 couple pound steel climber on my back. Had to steer by the horns, drug them up the mountain, packed all that stuff in my back seat, threw the deer in the trunk. The deer wouldn't fit, so the deer's head sticking out. And I had a football breakfast meeting, and I just went straight there. We went straight to Denny's, and I pull in with this little Ford Escort. There's a buck hanging out of the trunk.
oh man, that's awesome, dude. That's hilarious. It's you'll there's always the best stories of just, I guess I'll reframe it. as we kind of get older, we get all these different toys and trinkets and things like that to kind of make things more efficient and stuff like that, right? Which is great, right? It's a lot of the gear now today is just, second to none. But there's something about, when you had nothing, but a Ford Escort and a football meeting, right? And a 35-pound steel climber, that,
Yep.
and you just were going to get it done anyway, I love hearing stories like that because it makes you think about I think sometimes we make this a lot harder and a lot more complicated than it really is or than it needs to be, you
Absolutely.
know? And I think when we think back to when we were kids and we were just going out trying to find deer, and we were stoked to find like a good rub or some scrapes or, or run into, a couple deer, a couple bucks, like whatever, a couple does, even whatever the case was, like that was a good day. Yeah. And I think now we sometimes kind of get away from it. And that story you told made me think of my Uncle Randy. He shot, I think it was a small buck he shot. I mean, we didn't shoot very big bucks when I was growing up. There weren't a lot of big bucks around. And just truth be told, all the guys I grew up hunting with, we just like to shoot deer.
Hmm.
And he shot this one and it was pretty small. He didn't even gut it. He just drug it because he was hunting on the property where his house is, and we had a hunting camp that was back there. And he was kind of notorious for not going very far from the house or very far from camp to hunt. And he shot it, drug it out, small deer, and he just threw it in the back of he had one of those old Eagle Scouts, is what he had, all of those AMCs, and threw it in the back of it, and was pulling up. I think it was to talk to my uncle, my other uncle, and because he heard him shoot. He's like, "Hey, did you shoot?" And he's like, "Yeah, I shot this small buck, got it in the back of the Scout here," and the deer wasn't fully dead. Like he hit it, and it kind of like just like knocked it out. Like, I mean, it died, but like it kind of had one last gas and jumped up and kicked the back windshield out of his Scout and broke windows. It was
That,
hilarious. Like, it finally passed away, right? Or it finally died, but not before it took a couple windows and tore up the inside of his car a little bit, which is pretty hilarious. He's also the same uncle that caught his pant legs on fire the one year, made a fire, fell asleep, his leg landed
oh
in the
man.
fire.
And there's older guys always have the best stories. My
Dude,
dad's told
don't
me
they,
some,
man?
oh my God, my dad's told me some stories that I just like roll about. He, I
Yeah.
mean, one time he told me one time he shot a deer with his bow, and he literally like he shot it with his bow. It ran off, fell over. So he walked over, looked at it, said he went and got back on his three-wheeler, came up, hooked it to the deer, was dragging the deer back to the house, and the fuller or the three-wheeler bogged down. He looked behind and the deer was on all four trying to backpedal. So, I mean, people might not like to hear that, but it's a funny story.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the thing, man. It's, when you grow up in, the area we grew up in, it was, I mean, it's rural, and so
Oh
it's,
yeah.
it's a lot of Appalachian and, farm folk and logging community and stuff like that. And so it's very much people who, it's just I'm trying to figure out how to say it. It's, you get by with however you can. You know what I mean? It's not a. I'll say this, and I love my hometown. That it's not an area that if you're real interested in political correctness, you don't want to go there. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like that's the
Yeah.
best way I can say it, right? It's like they're going to get the job done however they want to get it done, no matter what it is, whether it's hunting or anything else, and they're going to get it done by the best way that they know how to do it, and just get the hell out of the way. And that's
Simplify
how.
redneck.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I love it, man, because I think, like I was saying earlier, I think we complicate not just hunting, we complicate a lot of things in our lives in general. And like I think, when I think back to, how I'm going to solve a problem or whatever, a lot of times I go back to my roots of like, what is the simplest, most, what is the most simple way that I can solve this thing without creating a whole other set of problems, for myself or for somebody else,
Yep.
and it's that a little bit of that redneck ingenuity, man. You know what I mean? It goes a long way, dude. It's for sure.
Yep.
That's awesome, man. We have a lot of similar kind of stories and upbringing, which is cool. But other similarities we have is we both like to train. You mentioned training. You try to keep things simple. It's like you're working, you're scouting, and you're training. Pretty simple, dude, when it comes to that. But this past year, you had a little monkey wrench thrown into the training and hunting kind of component of things, right? And so what happened there?
Yeah, I ended up tearing the my pec tendon in half when I was training. You know, it's
Yeah.
not a good feeling when it first happens.
Yeah, I bet not, man. So I know you do a lot of like heavy lifting. Like do you compete or anything, or you just enjoy picking heavy stuff up?
Yeah, I competed for about 8 years, and then I pretty much gave up actual competing aspect about 3 years ago.
Hmm. Okay. Was it powerlifting? Is that what it was?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. The Yeah, and so you still would you say you still train like you're competing? Like is that still like your level of like how much you put into maybe not as much time because work and all those types of things, but like same type of mindset and same approach?
Yeah, it's just a lot smarter now. I'm doing a lot of the same movements, but not quite as heavy in most aspects. And then I
Mm-hmm.
just stray away from things that cause extra aches and pains, if that makes sense. Over
Yeah,
time, you do
yeah,
so many different movements that you figure out what causes you more issues than they do good. You know what I mean?
right, yeah. What so how did you get started competing in powerlifting? Because I only personally know two people that so you're the second that I know that who competed in powerlifting.
Mhm.
The other one is Brandon Lilly. Like I've met him through like the show, and we still chop
Yeah.
it up once
So,
in a while.
uh, Brandon Lilly is an awesome dude, man.
Yeah.
I've never talked about my powerlifting career on any
Hmm.
kind of podcast or anything like that, but Brandon Lilly was actually like me and him talk. He's super cool. He was
Hmm.
actually like a lifter that I looked up to when I was coming up. So he was like in the animal cage at the Arnold. It's like a
Hmm.
invite only. You have to be like best of the best to get invited. And
Hmm.
eventually I worked myself in there and I got to compete in there too in 2019. And then me and
Wow.
him got to talk and stuff. And it's cool because me and him were kind of on the same path where he powerlifted and did what he wanted to do with it. And now he's more into just the fitness and hunting side.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, he's a super cool dude. I do really enjoy talking to him. I think he's just you know he's had an interesting road, right? Injuries and
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of messed up stuff, that he had to kind of go through or whatever. And I think because of that, he has such an interesting perspective on training, health, wellness, hunting, like everything, right? It kind of
Yep.
shaped. Would you say similarly, like, so when you stopped power competing to power lift, was it kind of a decision that you made, or was it one that, your body or otherwise made for you?
It was both. So I had pretty much done everything that I wanted to do with the sport. But once I got to a certain level, just like anything else, you get to a certain level in anything, you start to notice that politics get involved.
Mm.
So I went to a meet in Delaware where there were some referees that weren't the biggest fan of me. And just
Mm.
because of that, I ended up suffering in that meet because I was getting red lighted for really dumb stuff that had nothing to do with my lift.
Right.
Yeah. So that just
Yeah.
once the politics started to roll in is when I decided to roll out.
Right. Yeah, man. It's such a bummer that those types of things kind of ruin, something that somebody enjoys. Because I mean, it happens in everything,
Hmm.
right? Whether it's powerlifting, you know, um, you do the hunting podcast stuff enough. Like if you're willing to and want to get into that and mix it up in that way, you certainly can. It's like I try to
Yeah.
stay out of I always kind of say it's like I'm not in the hunting industry per se. It's like I like to say that I live on the outskirts of it because I do the show and it is what it is, and um, yeah, I do it the way that I want to do it, and that's all there is to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like I don't have
exactly.
anybody,
Yep.
telling me what I need to do or what I can't do or what I can't do. And when I was in music, it was the same way. The more
Hmm.
like successful you got, the more politics, and that was the same reason why I left music. And even like in the jiu-jitsu community that I'm in, I don't see it as much because I'm not like a big competitor. but I know guys who are, and it certainly can get that way. Like when you start competing at like at a more significant level,
Absolutely. And
um,
also, it was probably getting close to time for me to. I was either going to have to make a big change in the way that I was training, or just stop training the way that I was, because the guys that I kind of rolled with and trained with really early on, man, we trained hard and we pounded hard, and I'm definitely going to end up probably paying for it later in life.
right,
It was
right.
just all old school, just iron, you know what I mean? That's just the way we trained.
Yeah. Yeah. And now it's like I imagine there's just, like with every other sport, like there's, a lot more focus on rest and recovery and training a certain way for longevity. I look at the guys, I love grappling, right? So I look at a lot of the wrestlers that train and stuff like that. And, Penn State, the nationals are coming up, it'll be on or over by the time this releases. But I just look at the way wrestlers train now versus the way we trained when I was growing up. I mean, it was just go in the room and just like beat the piss out of yourself for several hours, starve yourself to make weight. Like there was no understanding of nutrition or, it was just the only way you got better or better in shape was to go harder for longer. That was it.
Yep.
That was the only way. And the only way you made weight was you stopped, you tried to tighten up your diet, but, didn't know anything about that really. So the simplest way was like fewer calories in and more calories out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Was the method, and now they have it so dialed to science, and, they're focusing on recovery and nutrition and all those things. And it's like, and they're all wrestling closer to like their natural weights too. They don't cut nearly as much weight as they used to. Now they actually certify weights even in high school. They certify them and stuff like that. So they're not cutting too much weight, which is good. But yeah, I mean, just like hunting too, man. It's like, just think about the time when we were kids to now, how different it is. Not just like the technology, but like the mental part of it even.
Oh, dude, it's night and day difference, man. It's unreal.
Yeah. So I want to go back to your injury though. So like when this happened, it happened over the summer,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken, right? And so what was that at first? I mean, did you think that your season was in jeopardy or what were your kind of feelings about that?
Absolutely. As soon as that thing popped and they pulled the bar off of me, I looked right. I forget who I said it to. I think I said it to my fiance. I looked right at her and I was like, I think I'm gonna be able to shoot my bow this year. I'm talking like 30 seconds after it happened.
First thing you thought of.
I was like, I think I'll be able to shoot my bow this year. She goes, Are you serious?
Man, it's wild how that's the first thought. Because when I boogered up my shoulder, that was my first thought too. Was I was waking up in the morning and when I finally went to get it fixed, and I started seeing like the guy who helped me kind of get things straightened out. He asked me what my goals were, and I immediately said, I want to be able to shoot my bow and hunt this fall, and I don't want to have to stop training jujitsu. I never said like I want to be able to sleep through the night because I couldn't sleep. Like I'd roll over and it'd wake me up every night. He's like, I just find it weird that you didn't mention that you would like to sleep normal. I was like, I can get by without that, man. I was like, but I gotta be able to shoot my bow and go hunt. I gotta be able to go train. I was like, there's the two things I gotta be able to do.
All in whatever
But
mindset you got.
that's right. That's right. So at what point did you realize like, I'll probably be able to shoot my bow, or I'll probably be able to hunt. And then did you start thinking about how it might have to be different or how you might have to do things differently?
Yeah. So basically, as soon as it happened, obviously I called and got surgery set up like as soon as I could. I think this was June 29th, I think, is when it happened, and I had surgery maybe like 5 days later. But
Mm.
in that time span, like I had right after the surgery, I went and I got like a 40-pound compound set up. So like
Hmm.
either way, I was gonna bow hunt. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I think it probably only took me July, August. I think by the end of August, I was out like shooting my bow, and I probably shouldn't have been. But I just needed to see. I just needed to know. And
Yeah.
it was a little awkward
Yeah.
at first, obviously, because when you have surgery, things aren't. Your shit's tight, and you're not as loose and
Hmm.
stretched out like you should be. But
Hmm.
yeah, I just needed peace of mind to know that I could shoot a shot. So I shot like one or two shots, and then I just let it rest.
Right.
And to be honest, I really feel like I could have been back in the gym by September,
Mhm. Hmm.
but at that point, September is like the opener for Maryland was like September 8th or something. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, there's no point in even going back to the gym now when hunting season's going to start. So I basically took
Right.
off the gym all hunting season this year just to give that extra time to heal and not mess with it. So I probably gave it like an extra 3 months of heal time.
Nice. I'm sure your body probably appreciated that too, though, right? It's like,
Oh, I slept a lot
and
better.
how, yeah, that's right, man. Yeah, it's funny how, and I think this even goes for hunting sometimes. I know for me, I'm similar to you where I love being in the gym training. Like it's just what I like to do. It's like for me, it's almost like it's very similar to the woods where it's like when I get on the mat, it's just like a place where everything else kind of goes away, and I'm
Hmm.
there. Same thing whenever I'm hunting, it's like I try to be in the moment as much as possible. But what I do find when I train is that when I'm able to it's kind of usually forced on me, where I have to take like 4 days off in a row or something like that because maybe there's something going on with work or I got a family obligation or whatever the case is, right? Where I'll have 4 days off consecutively. And you'd think I'd do this more often because every time I come back from it, it's like I got better while I was gone. And it's
Hmm.
really just because my body like recovered well, right? I feel great. I can move really well, and my mind's real sharp because I'm not like working through things still. It's like it's kind of put things in its right place, and now it's like okay, now you can execute these things that you've been working on, you
Hmm.
know. And I feel like in hunting too, I feel like I started doing this more and more, probably the past 2 or 3 years, where I'll purposefully take days where I don't hunt. Like even while I was chasing that one deer this year, I would try to make them. I would pick strategic days. It's like I was trying to not miss good weather days or good wind days that I needed. And so I would look at the forecast and see what was coming up and be like, you know what, I could go hunt on Tuesday, but it's really kind of a throwaway day, and I want to hunt Wednesday, Thursday, Friday hard. So you know what? If I do hunt Tuesday, I'm going to hunt the evening only, and I'm going to sleep in, and I'm going to get some rest, and then I'm going to maybe scout a little bit, and then I'm going to hit it hard Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of value in kind of knowing that it's okay to kind of reset, right? Your mind, your body, and your approach often appreciates. Do you find the same thing like in training and hunting and things like that when you get a chance to kind of step back and let the fog clear a little bit?
I think with training, I'm a lot better at that. Hunting, maybe I just need to text you when I'm just pounding every single day. I just say hunting season, man. I just ain't got no quit. Like, obviously, I'm not going to go sit my absolute best spots every single day, nothing like that. But even on like a day where it's like my chances probably aren't high in my best spot, I'll still go sit somewhere else just because I don't know. I just have to be in the tree. I feel like I'm going to miss
Right,
something.
right.
And I know that's not true all the time, but at the same time, it's like I don't have kids yet. I don't have, I can be in the woods every day, so I try to take advantage of that. And if I can be in the woods every day, I'm going to be in the woods every day because I feel like on any given day I can learn something like super crucial for the future. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean being in the woods certainly is the more you are, the better the better your odds are, right?
hmm.
I think for me, I've just kind of learned when maybe my mind isn't as sharp as it should be, and I'm like, you know what, I can benefit from sleeping in today, you know,
Yep.
and get that extra kind of like 2 hours of sleep, and there were some times where it's, I would sleep in, get up, have some coffee, and it'd be like, feel pretty good. You know what? I'm gonna. What time is it? It's 10:30. All right, I'm gonna go out and I'm just gonna do a walkabout. I'm gonna go check a couple trail cameras, do some scouting. I wanted to see this one area over here I haven't gotten to, and so some days it would be that I would do that where it was kind of a lighter day, where it
Right.
wasn't like I was gonna sit in the tree all day, but I was gonna, to your point, I was gonna try to go learn something.
Hmm.
Especially I think it also depends on if you really feel like you have something dialed, and it's just a matter of time,
Right.
or for me this year, the difference was like I kind of knew what that deer was doing, but I was still felt like I was trying to catch up to him. I was
Hmm.
trying to get in front of him. And the only way I could do that, I couldn't sit in a tree and do that. I had to be down and moving, and so some days I would just take a day and that's what I would do. Um, and that was kind of like a rest day, so to speak, because man, those days in the tree when you're sitting, all day potentially. Those are, you know, people that don't hunt don't realize, but those are hard days. Those are
Oh
actually
yeah,
worse for me than they are if I'm putting on 8 miles, 9 miles, 10 miles, whatever. I'd rather do that than sit in the tree all day.
I would agree because I never do all day sits because
Yeah.
I can't sit still, man. I love to scout and learn about deer 10 times more than I do sitting in that damn tree stand, dude. If I
Yes.
sit there more than like 3 or 4 hours is a long sit for me because I work second shift. So if I'm hunting every morning before, I mean, I'm sitting like 3 hours. 4 hours, a 4 hour morning is if I'm in the tree an hour before daylight. So it's like I don't know. I love to. That's why I like the turkey hunt so much, man. Because I'm just running all morning
Yeah.
trying to catch a bird.
Right. Yeah. It's I used to be able to do the all day sits. Like that used to be, a tactic I guess I had, or a strategy that I had in my tool belt. Um, and I don't know what honestly what it was, what ruined me was going out to the plains and hunting a style where it's a lot of just glassing and moving. And once I got that taste, and then, chasing elk in the West and stuff like that. Like once I got a taste of that, I was like, I can't sit in a tree all day anymore.
Hmm.
It's a lot of partial day sits and then moving, trying to figure out where my next best spot is. Now, if I know I got a spot completely dialed and I'm like, it's just a matter of me being here when that deer is going to be here, can I force myself to do it? Yes. Have I? Yes. But it happens a lot less frequently than it used to. I think I might have did 3 all day sits this year, like for the whole season, and that was it.
Yeah, don't get me
Um,
wrong. Like I'm not saying I bounce around like crazy, like anywhere. Like if I have a deer that is I'm specifically on, and I know I need to wait, like I won't hunt there. I might hunt other places, and I'm like, well, I'm probably not going to shoot anything unless it's like something surprises me and it's spectacular. But maybe I want to go sit and learn that area. That's what I'll use that morning
mhm.
for. Because you never know. Maybe in 2 years, there's a big deer in the section that you just put that morning into, and you've seen a couple does work through, you've seen deer move through, and now you know how they use it. Well, you're already ahead on that game over there. But if
Mhm.
I'm on a big deer, then I'll put time into a tree. You know, what I mean, if I know he's
Yeah.
there, and then I have that high percentage chance.
Yeah. Man, there's so much value in that kind of sit in a spot. I call them burner spots, because it's like I'm not afraid to burn it up because I'm not expecting anything. And maybe I'm hunting a specific deer, or maybe I'm not, because a lot of times I'm not hunting a specific deer. I might be hunting a group of 3 to 4 that, like, I'd be happy to kill any one of these, whichever one I happen to see. Um, and I'll kind of know what areas they're in, and those are the areas I'll hunt on the right winds and weather for those particular groups of deer. But there's something to be said to have those kind of burner spots. I mean, that was one of the things that I learned this year, where there was a spot I heard vocalizations in an area one morning when I was hunting, and I was like, man, I'm like 60 yards out of the game, 80 yards out of the game. And so the next day when I went in to hunt, I actually moved back into that area and hunted, and I was still just slightly out of the game of where I really, really needed to be. Um, Kicking the balls because the trail camera data told me that when I pulled the one trail camera. I was like, if I would have been 100 yards where I was planning to go, it would have been a different season this year. But the benefit was when I got to that spot, I saw 2 different bucks, and I think it was three different bucks that morning, and 2 does. And this was like later part of October, and they all kind of used the same route and went into this one corner. And so when I got down, and I was getting ready to move, like I was going to do some scouting and set up somewhere in the evening, I kind of walked that to kind of see it. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, cool. This is why they're using this. They're coming from over here. And I kind of knew where they were coming from. And so I was like, oh, so this is the route that they're taking. And so now that kind of just goes into the memory bank. And it's like, man, when I go to hunt that area again, if I think there's a good deer in that area, I have a chance to run into him. Like I now have that spot kind of dialed in. I know right where the part of the swamp corner they want to get to, and there's so much value in that. I mean, that day it seemed like a hunt, right? But
Yep.
in hindsight, it's actually likely to pay dividends in the future, and it's so good just to watch what deer are doing in general, even if it's not the one you want to kill.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in constantly thinking about the future. So I constantly, like this year, I do this all the time, but this year specifically, like one of my biggest goals is like it's what, March 16th, and I
Mm-hmm.
pretty much have all of my 2025 stuff done. Like
Nice.
it's pretty much all done. Like cameras are hung, they're where they need to be based off of historical intel. Trees are picked, trees are prepped if I can, and now everything from here on out, like my next couple trips to Ohio and stuff, are either going to be just working days where I'm pulling cameras that maybe I haven't made it to yet, but I know I'm not going to hunt this year, or I'm scouting for
Mm-hmm.
like 2026, 2027. Like I'm looking for future
Mm-hmm.
spots to potentially move into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, it's such good advice for people. You know, I'm similar in the way that my cameras rarely come out of the woods. You know,
Yep.
especially if I have them in kind of like really good areas that I know are historically good. Now, not each spot is good with like a buck I want to chase every year in it, right? But it's like I keep tabs on those spots because there's just multiple things that come together in those spots that make it where deer want to be. You know, and so it's just a
Hmm.
matter of there being a good deer in that area that's going to end up using it that year or not, right? And so I kind of keep tabs on those. And then most of my off season, a lot of time, this year's a little bit different because I didn't hunt anything, you know, close to me this year. And so I went out yesterday, and a lot of it was just kind of going back through places I hadn't been in like the past year plus. You know, had cameras in there, ran all last year, but I hadn't visibly been in there. And glad I went in because we had a lot of windstorms and just tons of trees down all over the place. And it kind of it changed some stuff. And there's one spot that I've found that I've walked by it, I don't know, probably 5 years. I've gone to it for 5 years in a row. I'd walk through it and always be like, man, this is a great spot. But I'm like, the setup's sucking here. It's like almost a little bit too open. I feel like I'm going to get busted, you know? And so I've never put a camera there, and there was always like a scrape there, but like it just didn't make sense for whatever reason. Right. And so I go in this year, there's a huge tree down, and the way it fell is kind of up against this drainage that kind of runs out of this clear cut. And so now instead of there being one scrape there's three scrapes. There's a scrape underneath a licking branch from the tree that's down. There's a branch overhanging. They made a scrape under that. And then there's across the drainage, there's two scrapes on the opposite side of the drainage. And I'm like, boom, now I got a spot. I was like, because this down tree, I was like, I can actually tuck in underneath of it if I need to, next to it, and hunt it off the ground.
Hmm.
I was like, the way that tree's positioned and it's so big, like it's still pretty tall, even though it's down, like the branches and stuff, because it's a huge freaking tree. I was like, I can actually climb the tree next to it and have it use it all as back cover.
Yep.
Because the setups in there previously were going to be skylit all the time, unless you hunted on the downhill side from them. But I'm pretty like they're usually coming out of that cut off a mountain down is usually like the travel route for them. And so it's just going back and revisiting an old spot, and like the trees being down just totally changed it, where I'm like, this is now a kill spot. You know, I was like, this is now a spot where you can kill a good deer if there's a good deer in the area.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that just goes to, I mean, if you put as many boots on the ground as you can, because there's stuff changing in the woods constantly. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If you just sat and thought that that was just a back burner spot where you didn't really think you'd be at a hunt, and you didn't even go check it until season, you know what I mean? You're way ahead
Mm-hmm.
of the game now.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Because now in my mind, it's like if I'm going to hunt locally, like that is because there's one spot that I've hunted in there, and it's I've had a couple really good deer in there a couple different years, and like they beat me every time, and it's so hard to access, and I haven't I hadn't really 100% dialed the access in essentially, right? And now I'll tell you more about it when we're off the podcast because I don't want to give too much away about it. But it's just the access was challenging in it, and um, and when I came across this spot, it's close enough to that spot that I've historically hunted that I'm gonna see the same deer, but now with that tree being down, it creates a natural pinch when they come out of this cut where they've got to kind of come around that tree, and which is exactly why all those scrapes are there. You know what I mean? Because they're ultimately heading over to where the other setup that have trouble accessing, they're all moving that direction. They're all either coming from there or they're headed there. Right. And so that tree acts as like the little kind of, they got to make a decision when they get there. Do they go in front of it or do they go behind it? Either way, like they got to go around it.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's like a now a nice little ambush spot for me.
It'd be a good place to put a camera on video mode.
Yeah, that's there will be one there this year. For sure. I was on a mission yesterday, so I only had so many in my pack, and I was like, all right, and the nice thing is like it's easy for me to kind of swoop through that spot to get to like two other cameras, and so it'd be easy to get back to. But so then we started talking a little bit about postseason scouting and stuff like that, and so I know you're big on killing your deer in the off season essentially, right? And so what does that look like for you? I know you scout kind of years in advance and start finding new spots, but if you and I were to go out somewhere and scout and we've never been there, like how are you kind of getting started on that piece?
It'd be just like anybody else. I'd probably use my scouting app, whatever that be. Spartan Forge is usually what I use. I'd be looking for. It depends if we're just talking mountain ground, since we have that in common. I'd be looking for clear cuts, buck laurel, any kind of edge where topography gets tighter, creek, drainages, hollows, anything that makes a pinch. I have things that I like to look for on the map. I mean, but anything that gets pinched down close together, topography lines, edges, transition, those are where I want to start. So I'll lay like a couple pins, and I'll just blow right to that, because I usually find all the main sign in those spots, and if it's not where I need to be, then I can work off of that. And this is where like there's no there's no cheat code for it. Like boots on the ground is the only thing that's going to kill deer. Yeah, you can lay a pin on the map and go hunt a drainage ditch and probably kill deer, but once you get in there, it's almost never exactly what you think it is. So, I mean, boots on the ground is the biggest thing. I can't even stress that enough. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen the same setup twice. Everybody has these certain tactics or certain things they like to see, but it's like, I find those things, but they're almost never repeatable in a second spot. So every single spot is always different. Something's always different. So you just have to get in and look for it yourself. But, yeah, I mean, like the couple things I like to look for is just anything thick. Like it's got to be thick. You're not gonna kill a booner out in the middle of open hardwood timber unless you're just the luckiest guy that pulled a rabbit foot out of his ass on November 10th. Like, so there are those guys out there though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we all know a couple of them. You know what I mean? It's like, but I always say, I'm like, man, I ain't that guy. I've never been that lucky.
I'll leave the rabbit foot at home. It ain't do nothing for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just like to be in where it's thick and find the sign and read it and figure out where they're going to, where they're coming from, why they're doing it. I mean, I'm huge on scrapes, man. I love scrapes, but you just have to find the right ones in the right area. It's got to be thick enough for where the deer wants to use a scrape or check it in the daylight, which is also related to cover. So,
yeah, and you and I have that in common. Where I'm a big scrape hunter guy. It's probably my preferred approach. I don't necessarily always hunt on top of the scrape, but I always like there to be one nearby. I guess is kind of how I put it. I think one of the, for people who are maybe newer at, trying to use scrapes effectively and stuff like that, I think the learning curve around those is exactly what you said at the end, which is like, why is the scrape there to begin with, right? Because the scrape is just the visual kind of exclamation point that there's deer that are wanting to spend time here, right? Because you can have different. I've had one situation where I found one scrape that was just like gangbusters, dynamite, crazy inventory, crazy just activity on it, basically the entire year, and then really heated up in October, and then I hunted it and had. Saw two good deer in that general area, and then the next year I thought, man, this is gonna be dynamite spot, and nothing the next year. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say nothing, but just not nearly the same, right? And what I realized is like, yes, it's close to bedding. It was a big primary scrape. There was a big signpost rub that was like maybe 20 yards away, but the big thing was that it was always going to be okay. But the years, what I found of watching it for several years is like, man, when it's dynamite, is like there's there's a handful of like oak trees in this particular area, and where I hunt, there's not necessarily always a lot of oaks. Like they're kind of concentrated, right? And when those oaks drop, and it's a combination of white and reds, that place is on fire, right? And when it's not, it's I don't want to say it's a ghost town, but it's very, very specific like window of like when you're
Hmm.
going to have activity you can actually capitalize on. And so it's just like you have to learn those scrapes where it's like, is it super bedding focused? It's always usually adjacent to bedding, but is it like dynamite bedding, or is it like bedding and food are there? Is it just happen to be because it's in a pinch where all deer are all crossing there from coming and going, whether it's from food or bed or whatever the case is, that like they're always congregating there. And so that's just the natural place where they're laying the sign, you know. That's the biggest thing for me in figuring out how and when to hunt different scrapes, if that makes sense. Do you kind of find the same thing?
Yeah, the only difference here is there's oaks literally everywhere, I feel. Like it's super
Really?
diverse where there's chestnut oaks, red oaks, pin oaks, white oaks, and then those are all mixed in and about like laurel thickets, clear cuts, red
Hmm.
maple thickets. I mean the list goes on, but I mean there's a lot of things to learn if you're going to be a scrape hunter, if that's your thing.
Hmm.
Like if you're talking, how do I want to explain it? So I mean you can have all kinds of different scrapes, and everybody knows that there's different kinds of scrapes, but your giant community scrapes a lot of times are in more open areas because I feel like the more nighttime stuff, like a big oak bottom. Um, but I think one of the major things is that changes how good a scrape is obviously food and does.
Hmm.
So if you know where there's a really good scrape at, and if somebody was like, oh, let's just say somebody's just trying to learn, if you know where there's a really good scrape at, but there's thick cover near, I would be going in there this time of year to try to find fresh beds. Like verify that the does that were in that area this season are still there and are going to be there this coming season. Because I've had scrapes that were really, really fire, and then the next year were completely dead. And it's pretty much because they do so many gun drives here. My assumption was they drove that and probably shot 4 out of the 5 does that were living there. There's not there, so
Hmm.
the scrape's not going to be hot. Like if there's no does, the bucks aren't going to be using that scrape and checking on those does as they're just not existing anymore.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think the does and the bedding are the biggest thing for me. I have to verify the deer are still there because there is so much food here. It's really hard for me to kill a food-based buck on a scrape unless
Hmm.
it's like in season, like right on top of it, kind of a deal. So like that's where the trail cam data really comes in over time. You find the scrapes that are historically good every year, and then you could time your hunts on those. And if you're still trying to kill a specific buck, then maybe if you know where he's bedding at, then you could hunt a concentration of scrapes or a scrape that's just really close to the thicket or bedding that he's coming from to try to kill him.
Right. Yeah. So I'm curious, because you and I have a similar approach to, watching things for multiple years, kind of getting a pulse for like a spot, and knowing, and we'll just use scrapes as an example, right? Where it's, scrapes fire, beds are there this year. It should be fire the coming year, right? Or you learn that it's fire, but there was a great, acorn drop right near that scrape in general, right? And the years that you have that scrape is exponentially better than the other years, right? Um, how long do you like to watch like a general area, like through trail camera data or whatever the case is, before you're willing to kind of say, you know, I'll give you this example. Like there's spots that I know that I've watched long enough where I'm like, yeah, I can set my watch to this. On this date, I'm going to have my first, like the most mature deer in that area is going to make his first appearance on camera this date, and he'll be killable in this like 3 day window, right? Um, I'm curious how long. Like for me, that was 3 years of watching. Like to like first year, I was like, huh, good activity. Second year, I was like, seems really consistent with last year. The third year, I was like, this happens every year now. It's like I can set my watch to it. So for me, it's 3 years usually is what I give it. Like then I know that I can kind of like really kind of take some of the trends and like they're going to be pretty solid. What's that timeline for you?
I think 3 years is really solid because I think it takes 3 to 5 years in general to just learn an entire area. For
Hmm.
me, I would love it to be 2 or 3 years. Sometimes it's three, but to be
Yeah.
honest, I'll just use Ohio as an example. Like I've killed a buck every single year I've been to Ohio, but I've yet to kill one of the megas that I get on camera, and I've even had encounters with. It just I try to make things on such a micro level to where I mean, by year 6 or 7, man, I might be able to kill that buck like whatever big buck is in there, I might be able to kill him in the same spot every year. Like that's how like fine
Right.
tuned I want to be in the future.
Right.
But I mean, that's just an example. Like I run probably 20 cameras in Ohio every year, and they've all been in the same couple ridge systems, but now they're starting to shrink. Now they're
Mm.
coming down and getting tighter and tighter. I've had encounters. I know where the does are bedding. I know the loops the bucks are making. And now I'm just fine tuning like, where's that buck going to put his foot at?
Mm. Yeah. The yeah, I mean when you start getting to the point of, you know, having multiple years of intel, there's a confidence that kind of comes with that. It's kind of hard to describe it. Like there's certain spots that I've known for several years where it's like I know if there's a deer in there, I know whether or not now whether I get an arrow in him or not, remains to be seen. Deer do deer things. This one particular area I'm talking about, I've been okey doed by 3 different bucks in that spot. You know what I mean? Where it was just like, just in bow range, just wasn't able to get an arrow off. Um, but there's a level of confidence when I walk in there. It's like I know that if there's a good buck in that area and it's within this window of time, like I know I'm probably going to see him.
Mhm.
You know, I'm curious, man, that in Ohio, what is it that you think is keeping you from sealing the deal on one of those megas?
Well, first I got to hit them. I've missed one or two.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's a good
I've
starting
missed,
point.
yeah, I've missed one or two for sure. Um, I, I'm trying to think back. I was in what in my mind I was in the perfect tree this year, and it would have happened. But how November rolls, I had a 160 incher 10 point. He came into this big bowl system that I was in. I was on the drainage crossing, great big scrape at 15 yards. He came right in. The doe was leading him. Of course, the doe was always the issue.
Hmm.
She was so focused on just trying to get away from him that instead of, if he was by himself, I promise you that buck would have walked to 15 yards. Like there, he just had no other reason in the entire world to go the direction he did, other than that doe led him up and out of the bowl and across the ridge above me at 60 yards because she was more worried about getting away from him than they were coming through that ditch crossing. So I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do in November in that you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
man, I tell you, the wind, man, the thermals in the wind and that steep hill country when you get those vacuum effects, that's when you really
Hmm.
start to like figure out like, man, that's why I haven't been seeing any deer in here. Once you find those elevation lines, the where it comes, you can stand there for 2 minutes and you're getting hit from the bottom. But if you stay there and all of a sudden you start getting hit from the back and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Once you
Yeah.
start to find that stuff out, you're like, ain't no wonder I haven't killed a big one here. So like,
Yeah.
even though there was a possibility for me to kill that big one I had an encounter with in that spot, in that scenario, that specific scenario, I have learned from sitting in that spot like 4 times that I can't sit in the middle of that ditch no matter what because of how the air flows. So now
Hmm.
I've already been in there this spring or postseason, and I have setups on the outside edges that are way more fine tuned. Where like on this side of the bowl, 5, 6 trails come together. This tree right here, I seen deer come up the hill in the evening on this side when I was sitting in the ditch. I have a tree picked out. Like if I have a strong west wind that's blowing up and out of that bowl right there, I could kill anything that comes through that intersection. But in a morning sit, I can come from the bottom and swing up on the opposite side on one little tiny like I'll call it no, it's not even a bench. It's maybe like an old 2 track, but it's like folder size, and it comes down
Hmm.
along the side of the drainage and wraps around a point, and there's a perfect scrape under a real small white oak right there. And I'm telling you, man, one of those 2 spots is where I'll kill a big one in that system. I have
Right.
way too much camera data in that area now. Like it's not cocky, it's confidence. It's like eventually it's going to happen. Like if that,
Hmm.
it might be another 5 years. I don't know, but I'm gonna kill. I'm gonna kill a fucking big one right there.
Hell yeah. The man, the thermals and that. I mean, hill country is one of those things where um, I think at times it can be really easy to play the wind and the thermals, like in those setups, and then there's other times in areas like because I know what you're saying. There was one spot that I hunted. And this was in Ohio too. That my buddy and I were on two different really big deer, and this one deer we had, well, both deer we had multiple years of trail camera data, and both were pretty. They moved through like clockwork every year, and there was a window of time where they were going to be really, and this is a big woods piece, and so they're going to be around for like a couple day period of time, and then they were going to be ghosts again. And we had it timed pretty well, and the weather was kind of shit this particular day, and I sat in this area like where this scrape was. I was maybe 40 yards off it or something like that, and it was one of those situations where it was just like I could not get a wind to play for me that day. Like the wind that I had should have been right, and it just would not be right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it didn't booger me up necessarily. I think it made him a little less willing to move and come through that area because there was a doe in the morning and she was on probably like 80 yards from me, and it was super foggy and I couldn't see and I could hear her blow, but my wind was going the opposite direction, so I knew that she couldn't smell me, and I couldn't figure out why she blew. And then all of a sudden I heard a big grunt, right? And I didn't know what deer it was, and I was kind of in base. It's not a saddle. It's just like this kind of similar. It's like an old 2-track comes up off the bottom, kind of connects, and then it pitches back down over this like steep kind of drop off. And then I came down off the top of the ridge down kind of into this like intersection where all three of these things kind of connect. And that's where I was set up. Right. And the top of it, it's like this big bowl, but it's like, when I say it's a bowl, it's really steep and sheer to come, if you were to come down off of the bowl, essentially. Right. Like you wouldn't really ever want to walk down it. Right. But there's an area around it I don't want to say flat, but it's like, it's not so steep that a deer couldn't kind of bed on like the rim. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like as it starts to grade down and then it drops. And so I sat there, fog, started pissing rain on me. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to move. And I heard this buck grunt, and it sounded like he was up like in the bowl, like at the lip of it. And I never called or anything. In hindsight, I probably should have rattled to see if I could get some movement, get him to play. But I just thought he kind of moved on or whatever and went with that doe is what I thought. And so whatever time it was, I was like, all right, I'm going to switch spots. I'm going to move. Got up, started walking out, and where I heard that grunt from is like kind of I had to walk near that area to kind of get out to like the access route to get out to the truck. And as soon as I got like, I was maybe 10 yards from it, dude, buck jumped up, boom, took off. And he was laying right where I heard him grunt. And he just was not going to come down and play the game because the wind was so screwy down there. I think he was just going to lay there, until there's a doe scent kind of wafted to him and he could kind of take off or what, but he just wasn't going to come play the game down near that scrape area where the wind was unpredictable. And so I think sometimes the unpredictability of the wind will screw us. I think sometimes it screws us in the sense that like the deer just aren't going to move there. You know what I mean?
Sometimes deer just do deer shit.
That's the other thing too. It's like
You just
you
no
do.
fucking idea what they're gonna do. You just gotta be
That's
lucky enough
it.
to be in the right spot sometimes.
That's right, man. I've talked to my buddy Tony Peterson about this so many times where guys like you and I will sit here and talk about this like we think we know what the deer was thinking. And that deer probably just decided he was going to lay down there.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like he probably didn't even care about. He probably like, well, I don't care what the wind's. I'm just going to lay down here. I'm tired.
Yeah.
If we start thinking through all these permutations of what they do, and it's like, truth is, we don't know.
No.
Nobody does.
No.
But it's fun
No.
to play the game.
Oh yeah. No, all you can do, man, is do your scouting and put yourself where you're gonna have the highest odd and play the wind the best you can and hope for a little bit of luck on your side.
That's right, man. So this year, are you going to be trad bowing it up, or are you going to be compounding it this year?
I've come to the point where I just love archery in general so much that I do both, and it just
Yeah,
depends on where I'm hunting and what I'm hunting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. How's traditional bow life treated you so far?
Good. Yeah, no, I've been shooting for like 8 years. I
Yeah.
think I think I've I think I've shot 12 or 13.
Nice. So you're a pro at this point with the trad bow. You're not like me. I'm
No,
a
no,
noob, man.
I wouldn't say a pro, man. You're always learning. I will say that my first like two or three were not proud shots, that's for sure.
No. Nice. Yeah, yeah. I can definitely see that, man. It's I don't know, there's something about it though that just is enjoyable, that I do like to shoot a compound still, I still like
Mhm.
still like to shoot mine. But there is something about shooting the traditional bow that is just it just feels good. Like yesterday I was out, because the big incentive, not incentive, but the reason why I started shooting one was, I really want to be able to, you know, do that on the ground with a traditional bow, kind of what I did in the plains previously, but I want to do it with a traditional bow. And, I know you sometimes, depending, when you're in open country, you don't always get an opportunity to kneel or whatever to shoot.
Mhm.
And so that was part of the reason why I was like, some of those uh, bigger deer, they don't make a lot of mistakes. They don't walk out in the wide open. Like you got to get kind of close to them, or you maybe decoy one of them in or whatever, and you're going to have a weird shot because you're trying to stay hidden while they're approaching and stuff like that. So yesterday I was literally in the yard laying on my side shooting, like getting shots off, like leaning and laying over and stuff like that. Just because if I'm caught in an awkward spot, I want to be able to make sure I can still get a shot off,
Yep.
and that is the one advantage I will say over a compound bow, is that I can shoot from a lot of funky ass angles and still get an arrow off. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not shooting distance at that. I think the target I was shooting at yesterday was maybe 10 yards, with kind of playing around with like different ways to lay and sit and stuff like that. But my kill radius in general isn't going to be much past like, 22 or 23 probably.
Yeah, shit, I don't even shoot that. I'm like under 15.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of like in my head, I'm like, if I'm going to shoot 20 yards, I'm just going to take my compound. Like
Right.
the whole, I don't know how I'm trying to perceive this, but the whole point for me is like if I'm going to shoot with a stick bow, they need to be like 10 yards. Like that's the whole point of like the traditional
Hmm.
bows. Shoot them at like 10, 12 yards. So I mean, that's where I
Yeah.
like them. Like I shot four this past season with the stick bow, and my furthest
Nice.
one was 15. And I think I shot one at 5, one at 7, one at 11, and one at 15. Like the
Nice.
5 and 7's where I like them. Like I want them right
Yeah.
there.
The only reason I would say that like a into the low 20s for me is just and I don't think around here, like most of my shots in the timber are all sub 20 yards.
Mhm.
Um, I think when I get into open country and stuff like that, there's a lot more likelihood of a deer getting hung up at like 20 yards, 23 yards, 25
Right.
yards,
Yep.
and that's what you got,
Mhm.
because you just don't have things to move them into specific areas, and you also need to make sure, especially if you're decoying or whatever, it's like, I mean, I had one 2 years ago. I decoyed in an 8 point to, good Lord, man, I don't even know, on the ground. He was under 5 yards, like, and I was in the wide open. Like I was just sitting beside the decoy. Like the decoy had him so confused. Like I was moving it around and I actually drew my bow back just to see if I could get drawn on him. And I got drawn, you know, and I mean, I could have taken probably like one big step and grabbed him. Like that's how close he was, you know? And, yeah, so it's like the ground game in the wide open is just like a different animal. And I'm like, I don't know that I want to risk like having to get drawn and move and stuff like that. It's like I would want to be able to, if I need to, I want to be able to shoot to like 23 yards there,
Mhm.
because I also don't want to give up an opportunity on a Magnum Plains country deer because he's like 23 yards or whatever the case is.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
I think
but
it's
there's a
like
place. Go ahead.
it just all depends on what your goal is. For me, anyhow, like, and at the same time, you have to be okay with having a really big buck slip past you at 30 yards.
Yes.
You have to be okay with that. You know what I mean? So,
Hmm.
I mean, last year, or not this past season, the season before, 2023 is the year I hunted like 90% with a stick bow.
Hmm.
And the area I was hunting in, I mean, there was five, six big shooters, and I mean, there was 100 and like mid 150s running around in there that I know of, a little bit of history. I mean, I knew the deer was in there, and I had a stick bow in my hand, so I'm like, well, there's potential that he could slip by at 30 yards, and I just got to be okay with it. But I don't know.
Hmm.
At this point, it doesn't really bother me that much.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that like I don't want to kill a deer, like I want to kill a big deer like anybody else does. But I think it's just a lot of the experience and the chase
Hmm.
and like that adrenaline rush is like what gets it for me. Like I want to
Yeah.
put in all the miles, all the work, and then even if it's a 120 incher and he like reads the script and like comes in and
Dude.
just like destroys a scrape in front of me, he's dead.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that's everything that I wanted in my hunt. If I don't
Yeah.
kill the 150, whatever, somebody else will kill him. There'll be more of them eventually. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah. I love that, man, because that's, I'm the same way. It's like, you know, I'll have maybe some deer that I'm interested in killing, each year, but I'll be the first one to say if one presents me an opportunity and just writes a cool story for me to live, he's in trouble. You
yep.
know what I mean? Regardless of big or small or whatever the case is. Because especially I think, I was talking I was talking to Greg about this because he asked me, is it going to be stick bow going forward? And I said, yeah. I was like, the only way I could see that maybe I'd pull the compound out, I was like, is if I'm in the plains and there's a day where it's just like abnormal. It's always windy out there. I was like, but abnormally windy where like I can't, where it doesn't make sense to shoot a stick bow, like
Mhm.
that type of wind. I was like, then, it's like, then that day, maybe I take the compound out or whatever the case is. I was like, but by and large, and then he asked me, do my standards change? And I said, you know, I don't know. I was like, I'd have to see the deer. Like I'd have to see the deer. It'd have to be like in the moment of the hunt. It's like academically, I'm like, nah, I still want to shoot the same type of deer that I would always like to shoot. My weapon changing doesn't change what my interests are. I was like, but the weapon definitely changes how I feel in the moment in the tree or on the ground, like for sure. You know what I
Absolutely. I
mean?
think you need to kill about five does first.
Yeah, you ain't
I'm,
kidding. You
I'm
ain't kidding.
telling you, dude. I shot what's it? Yeah, 2023 in Maryland. I think 3 days into the season, I had two bucks working 15 yards, and it was just like 105 inch 8 point. And I tell you what, dude, I was more tore up shooting at that buck with that stick bow than I was shooting one of these big ones behind me. Like it was like
Yeah.
I was like a little kid, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my plan is I have I'm going to get out the early part of the season and try to get some blood on the arrow. I got a couple spots that I have marked that are just like really good doe spots where it's like, probably get in there any evening and
Hmm.
probably get a crack. And then my buddy Aaron, he actually has permission on this farm up by his house. That he said is just like overloaded with does, and
Nice.
it's really open. And there's basically just like a fence row that's in it. And so there's no trees to get into. So it would actually be very good for me to go out there and kind of do that because it would all be off the ground, and try to kill some does.
Hmm.
So I think I'm actually going to go up and do that with him as well and just try to stack a couple of them before shit gets real, essentially.
That's the way to do it, dude. That's what I did here this past season. I shot two does in Maryland with the stick bow. I try to get those out of the way early. I mean, their season comes in like September 8th, like I said, real early.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, I mean, I'll bounce between the two. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, I got quite a few nice deer to chase this year, and it really, I'm not like I have to hunt that deer with my compound, but it just depends on the setup. Like,
Hmm.
I'll hunt a big deer with my compound. But if there's a tree that's like I can make that work and it's like
Hmm.
10 yards, I'm like, I'm taking a stick bow. If I can
Right.
make it, if I can make it happen, it's like that just makes it way better. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
people make fun of me until I'm dragging a 150 out with a stick bow in its rack.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what's your plans for this year, man? So you're obviously going to be headed to Ohio. Well, what all you going to get into?
I'm gonna try not to spread myself thin this year. I'm going to try to spend as much time as I need to in Pennsylvania to kill one of these good deer. Ohio is always a priority too, just because I have a camp down there and I got a lot of time invested, obviously. Maryland is like hit or miss right now. I know where there's a big deer living at, and I've already went in and scouted it and laid 2 or 3 cameras in there. And I'm gonna play it like go in, scout right before the season comes in, maybe pull some cards. If he's consistent and I think I could kill him, I'm gonna buy my tag, hunt Maryland. If he's not, and I'm like, this thing's just gonna be a joker, I might not even buy my Maryland license, and I might just put my little bit of September into scouting PA before our opener. Because one thing I've done the last 2 seasons, I had this conversation like 10 times now with other buddies. 2021, 2022, I killed these two back to back behind me. So I killed 2 big ones 2 years in a row. Had a lot going on for me. And then all of a sudden, I got thrown into the social media stuff. And all of a sudden, the last 2 years, I've had really good years. I've had good encounters, but I've shot. I was, don't get me wrong, I was pleased with the deer that I killed. Like the deer that came in gave me the encounter I wanted, but it's not the deer that I'm capable of killing in PA, and it's mainly because I kind of wanted to get a kill, at the same time because I also wanted to bounce to the next state too quick. I was like, man, I really want to kill a buck in October so I can jump to Ohio, but I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to try to really. I know like a perfect season would be like, man, if I kill a slammer in PA and Ohio, that's way better than shooting a small buck in Maryland and a small buck here and shooting a decent buck in Ohio. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we're going to really try to focus my efforts back to stuff that I used to do in the past and spend the majority of my time hunting the better quality deer that I have at home before I go bouncing a bunch of different states, because I feel like for sure that's what's messed me up like the last 2 years.
Yeah, man, quality over quantity. That's always like you can never go wrong with that. Because I think some of the worst seasons, and like don't get me wrong, these seasons I had a blast or had a good time because like look, no one's going to cry me a river for getting the opportunity to hunt a bunch of different places, right? And but they were also like my worst seasons because the one year I went to Idaho, came home, I was hunting elk out there, came home. The season was already opened when I got home. I hunted for about a month roughly. Right. And I'm working dude, right? Like I work a regular 9 to 5. So it's really like weekends and some days I can take off, but I took off a bunch of time to go to Idaho. So I couldn't take off a bunch of time in October because I was also taking off like a week to go to the Midwest to hunt the plains. Right. And so it was just like, I felt like I never spent enough time anywhere to really get anything done, and so now what I try to do is I try to just plan like one larger trip, right? And it's like Pennsylvania and then wherever else I'm going to go, right? If I go elk hunt that year, I'm not going to take a whitetail trip because I'm spread too thin, right? And if I really want to go to Iowa or wherever, then it's like I'm going to dedicate my time to going hunting PA and hunting Iowa or Missouri or wherever whatever state I'm going to visit. That way I feel like that if things don't go the way I want them to go, it's not because I didn't have the time to invest, is because things just didn't work out. It wasn't because I was short on time and short on focus, so no, that's good. That's a good approach, man.
It's super fun to take all those trips, dude, but like, and that's fine. If you want to hunt 6 states, that's awesome if you're able to do that, but you have to adjust your expectations. That's all.
Yeah.
Like you can't expect to go to each state and shoot a 150 in each state. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah. And that's exactly what happens. It's like you end up passing deer that because of the time restriction that you're on, like you shouldn't be passing, and then like a lot of those trips, it's like I come home, like the Idaho trip, like, saw elk, but just couldn't get one killed. Right. And then came to PA, really didn't put a lot of time or effort into it because I didn't have a whole lot of time. I wasn't able to take any time off, and then went to the plains and had a really good buck, that gave me the slip. And that was the second or third good buck in those like 7 days that gave me the slip. And if I wouldn't have went to Idaho that year and would have just went to the Plain States, like I would have had more time to spend there to try to stay on that deer and like actually and go kill him. You know what I mean? But because I was skinny on time, it just, and I passed other deer because I knew what was there and what was possible. Right. I ended up not shooting anything, and so, and that's fine. It was still a fun trip, but your point's well taken. You're 100% right. You just got to adjust your expectations, based on the time you have and what all your commitments are.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, hey buddy, I know we've been chopping it up here for a little while. I want to be sensitive to your time. Let you get a little time with the significant other here this evening before the evening runs out. But before I let you jump out of here, absolutely, like Doug having you on. It's hilarious that we're actually from the same town. We're going to talk about that here as soon as we're done. But before I let you go, let people know where they can find out more about you and follow along with all the stuff you have going on.
Yeah, so I would say about 90% of everything I do is just on Instagram. Facebook's just for family. I will say I'm working with the cameraman right now, so I should have some YouTube stuff coming. I don't really have like the channel established or anything, but definitely already got some like pretty awesome stuff in the works, and I already got some preview stuff. So soon to come, hopefully have a little bit of YouTube going on, but for now, Instagram is where it is.
Awesome, buddy. Well, hey, buddy, I appreciate you coming on, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible: Tacticam, Osseo Gear, Hawk Optics, Tethered, Face Off E-Bikes, and Lathrop & Sons Boot Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.